All right, let's dive in. Today we're exploring Jordan B. Peterson's Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. We'll be pulling out key ideas and maybe, just maybe, some actionable advice on how we can all navigate this crazy thing called life.
Hmm.
Resilience, relationships, meaning, the good stuff.
Peterson really does get into the nitty-gritty of these very human struggles, right? And he gives us a potential path forward, often using these really captivating stories and ancient myths.
And his very first rule sets the stage. Do not carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievements, he says.
At first glance, seems kind of straightforward, but I'm curious, what are your initial thoughts on this one?
Yeah, on the surface, it does seem simple enough, but what makes it interesting is how it connects to, well, everything else Peterson talks about. It's like he's asking us to pause, to really recognize the value in the structures and systems we often just take for granted.
He pushes back against just dismissing everything as the system.
Right. And he tells this great story about a client who had a total perspective shift about his job. Yeah, this client was pretty unhappy. He thought his job was low status.
And Peterson encouraged him to just focus on doing his absolute best no matter what the job was. The result, 3 promotions in just 6 months.
Wow. That's really a testament to just changing your mindset. Even those jobs that seem, I don't know, kind of mundane, they can actually offer growth and potential if we approach them differently. And this actually reminds me of another rule where Peterson talks about recognizing our own potential. He says, imagine who you could be and then aim single-mindedly at that.
Yeah, that one hits home, doesn't it? It really challenges us to be honest about our own aspirations, about who we could become.
Absolutely. And the story he uses, the symbolic one about rescuing your father, based on the myth of Osiris and Horus, that one always intrigues me. Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. So in this ancient Egyptian myth, you've got Osiris, who represents order and civilization. He gets a little too complacent, right? And it's his son, Horus, who has to step up and confront these huge threats. He has to basically rescue his father.
I see. So it's not just about personal growth. It's about revitalizing those important structures that have maybe lost their way.
Exactly. And symbolically, it means we all got to face those things that are holding us back, those limitations, those internal dragons, if you will.
Hmm.
And just like Horus, we have to actively seek growth.
Now, this next rule, it almost sounds like a secret code. Notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. Okay, well, what's the hidden message here? What's Peterson getting at?
It's like he's saying, look, you can make the biggest impact in those areas where things are, well, falling apart, where nobody wants to step up and take charge.
He tells a story about a client who felt stuck in this corporate environment, lots of questionable practices, really frustrated by the lack of logic and reason. What did she do?
So she sees an opportunity. Instead of just complaining or getting cynical, she uses her position to actually challenge those practices. She finds a way to fight for truth, even within a system she found, well, frustrating.
Yeah. So it's about finding those areas where we can be a force for good, even within systems that seem, I don't know, rigid or maybe even a little broken.
And that ties in so well with his next rule, which is short and to the point. Do not do what you hate.
Seems pretty obvious, doesn't it? I mean, who actually wants to spend their days doing something they hate?
Yeah, but it's deeper than that. Peterson's warning us against building a life full of resentment. He gives the example of this woman trapped in a corporate job, just drowning in what he calls absurd political correctness. She found ways to resist, to eventually carve out a path that felt more meaningful.
It's a call to really be honest with ourselves. Am I staying in this job, this relationship? And is it slowly draining my soul, creating this deep resentment that's going to eat away at me?
Exactly. And he gets it. He knows change is hard, but staying stuck in a situation you absolutely hate, that takes a much bigger toll in the long run. You just got to weigh those costs.
Peterson's a clinical psychologist, right? And he really emphasizes the power of stories, especially when it comes to, well, facing those tough memories, those things we'd rather forget. He even shares a story about a client who uncovered a repressed traumatic memory, like a really buried memory, through hypnosis.
Yeah, and that story really highlights how the past it can shape our present in ways we don't even realize. And facing those memories, even if it's painful, can be so liberating.
It's not about dwelling in the past.
No,
Right?
it's about understanding how it impacts us now, in this moment.
And he asks the listener directly, he says, are there any unresolved experiences from your past that might be holding you back? And he suggests, maybe journaling, maybe seeking professional help. Those are options.
Yeah, it's an encouragement to look inward and, well, heal. He acknowledges that we all carry baggage, right? And sometimes unpacking it is the key to moving forward.
With this next rule, this is the one I'm still kind of processing. Try to make one room in your home as beautiful as possible. I mean, it sounds like interior design advice, but how does that fit into this whole picture of life?
It's one of those things where Peterson goes deeper, right? It's not just about aesthetics. It's about intentionally creating a space that nourishes you.
He talks about feeling awe in art museums.
Yes.
Nice.
He talks about how he filled his own home with these Soviet realist paintings, each one telling a story, evoking a mood.
It's like he's saying that beauty could be a source of, I don't know, a source of connection to something bigger than ourselves.
And it doesn't have to be this grand gesture. It could be a plant on your desk, a piece of art you love, just something that brings you a sense of peace.
So it's about intentionally bringing more beauty into our lives, even in small ways. Okay, now let's wade into the world of relationships. Peterson's rule is plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, it's practical, right? He's
Yeah.
acknowledging that relationships are, well, they're complicated and they require effort. He uses a story about a client who's considering an affair to highlight the importance of dealing with those challenges head on.
Instead of just checking out.
Exactly. He stresses that communication and negotiation, those are essential tools for keeping that connection alive.
He even gives advice on, how to choose a partner.
Yeah.
Have those conversations about what each person needs. Be upfront about it.
Right. Don't just hope they'll figure it out.
He's got some interesting thoughts about living together versus marriage. Cites research suggesting that living together without a clear commitment, it might not actually lead to stronger marriages.
It's like he's saying that vow, that till death do us part, it creates a sense of urgency that can actually be a good thing.
Urgency, how so?
Well, think about it. When you know it's for the long haul, you're more likely to work through those rough patches, right? To negotiate, to communicate, to really find solutions.
Because there's no easy out.
No easy out. So it's less about finding the one and more about making a choice and then doing the work, putting in the effort to make it last.
He also talks about, the damage that affairs can cause, not just to the people involved, but to their families.
Yeah.
It's a domino effect.
He's not trying to oversimplify things. Love and commitment, they're complicated. But he's offering a path toward, well, a more mature, a more fulfilling kind of partnership, a sustainable one.
And he even addresses, like, the timing of big life decisions. Suggests we shouldn't delay things like, having children for too long.
He's just being real about the biological clock, right? And how putting things off can sometimes lead to heartache. It's better to make those choices in a timely manner, he says.
So it's about really assessing what we value and then making choices that align with that instead of, getting caught up in what society says we should do.
He tells this story about helping a client decide whether to have children. And he uses this really, really surprising analogy. It involves a slaughterhouse.
A slaughterhouse. Wow. Okay, that's a powerful image. What's the point of that?
It might not be for everyone, but it illustrates this idea of confronting the hard stuff, the darker, more challenging aspects of life. Don't just avoid them, face them.
It's about choosing courage over comfort. Okay, I'm seeing a pattern here. It seems Peterson's approach is a mix of pragmatism, personal responsibility, and a big dose of facing those inner and outer demons.
He doesn't offer these easy answers, these quick fixes. He gives us a framework, a way to navigate life's complexities, with more awareness, more intention, and maybe, just maybe, a little wisdom sprinkled in from ancient myths and his own experiences.
We've just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to unpack. What are some other big themes we'll be diving into as we continue this deep dive?
We'll be looking at his thoughts on finding meaning, the importance of telling the truth, even his views on the shadow side of ourselves, that darker part of our nature.
Sounds like we're in for a wild ride. We'll be back soon to continue exploring Beyond Order. Until then, I'm going to leave you with this. Think about one room in your house. Could you make it a little more beautiful? Just a little. Or maybe there's a difficult memory you've been avoiding, something that might offer some valuable insights, if you're brave enough to face it.
Lots to ponder. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep working towards that life that truly matters. So we were talking about personal responsibility, right? Even in those situations that feel like, well, they're totally out of our control.
And he ties that to his rule about stories, how powerful they are for understanding ourselves or understanding the world. And he really gets into facing those tough memories, those things we'd rather just, shove down and forget.
Yeah, and he's not saying we should wallow in the past or anything. It's more about understanding it, you know? Like he uses this example of a client who uncovers this repressed memory, this really painful childhood experience through hypnosis and just reframing it, seeing it through an adult lens that allowed her to let go of all that terror and shame she'd been carrying for years.
Like those unresolved experiences, they become these ghosts in our present if we don't deal with them.
Exactly. And he takes that idea even further, connecting it to how we understand the world through stories, through narratives. He says that those ancient myths, those stories that have been passed down for centuries, like the Egyptian myth of Osiris and Horus, they offer these archetypal patterns, and those patterns help us make sense of our own lives, you know, our own challenges. Maybe we should talk about what archetypes are for a second.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
So in Jungian psychology, archetypes are these universal patterns of thought and behavior that are, well, they're present in what Jung called the collective unconscious. Think of them as blueprints for common human experiences, like the hero's journey, the battle between good and evil, the search for meaning, those big overarching themes.
I'm starting to see the connection here. So these stories, both personal and ancient, they give us a framework, a way to understand those universal human experiences.
Exactly. Peterson believes that we're wired to think in terms of stories. It's how we make sense of the world, how we find our place in it.
Wow. Okay, that's making me think about the stories I tell myself. Are there stories I've misinterpreted or maybe even avoided altogether? What happens if I look at them through a different lens?
Peterson's encouraging us to do just that, to look deeper into our own narratives and see what truths might be hidden there.
Yeah.
Okay, can we go back to that rule about making one room beautiful? I'm still kind of wrestling with that
Me
one.
too. It seems so, I don't know, so specific, but I know there's something more there.
It's definitely deeper than just, fluffing pillows and picking out paint colors. He talks about how he felt this sense of awe in art museums, like those paintings were offering a glimpse into another reality.
He also talks about his own experience filling his home with these Soviet realist paintings, each one with a story to tell, a mood to evoke.
It's about being intentional with the spaces we inhabit, recognizing that even small touches of beauty, they can have a big impact on us. It's like he's saying beauty can be a source of nourishment.
Yeah, I get that. It's like we can use beauty to push back against all the chaos and ugliness that's out there.
And the cynicism and the disillusionment, he even says it can be a form of resistance. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about relationships, that messy, beautiful world.
Yeah, Peterson has a whole rule about maintaining romance. He's very direct.
Yeah.
You know, schedule those dates, make the effort, be romantic. It's like it's a skill you have to practice.
He's saying love isn't just this feeling, this passive thing, it's a choice. You choose to nurture that bond every single day. It takes work.
He also talks about being really intentional about choosing a partner, really understanding each other's needs, and then, of course, communicating those needs.
Be upfront about it. Don't just, sit there and hope they'll just magically figure it out.
Right. He tells this powerful story about a client who was considering having an affair. And it really highlights the importance of facing those relationship challenges head on instead of looking for an escape route.
Yeah. He's reminding us that our actions, they have consequences. Infidelity, it might seem tempting in the moment, but it can cause so much damage to everyone involved.
It's a ripple effect. What about his views on marriage?
Yeah.
He makes this point about how the vow of permanence, that whole till death do us part idea, it can actually be beneficial. I gotta admit, that seems a little extreme at first.
Yeah, but his argument is that it creates this sense of urgency. And that urgency can actually be a good thing. It can motivate couples to put in the work to really make things work.
Because there's no easy way out.
Right. So they got to confront their differences, they got to negotiate, they got to find solutions because they've made this commitment to a life together.
Okay, I'm starting to see how that could work. It's like that thing we were talking about earlier, confronting those difficult memories. It's about choosing to fight for the relationship instead of just throwing in the towel when things get tough.
Exactly. And he acknowledges that it won't always be easy. Even the most loving relationships, they're going to face challenges. It's how we choose to navigate them that's what matters. Now, there's another area where Peterson dives deep, and that's understanding the shadow side of ourselves and of others, especially in relationships.
Yeah, I think we need to explain that a little bit. Shadow side, what does that even mean?
So he's drawing on Jungian psychology here, which says that we all have these darker impulses, these tendencies that we try to push down,
Good.
we deny them. Peterson says that acknowledging those aspects of ourselves, actually integrating them, that's crucial for healthy relationships.
He uses the word shadow. What's he talking about there?
The shadow, it's those parts of ourselves that we deem unacceptable, the negative stuff. And instead of acknowledging those traits in ourselves, we unconsciously project them onto other people, our partners.
Oh, okay. So, like, if I'm always criticizing my partner for being messy, maybe it's because I'm denying my own tendency to be disorganized?
Perfect example. So instead of blaming our partner for our own, unacknowledged flaws, Peterson encourages us to be more honest about our own
We've
imperfections.
got to remember that our partner's just like us. They're human, right?
They're imperfect beings doing their best, and understanding that shadow concept, well, it can help us build better relationships.
How so?
Peterson believes that embracing our complexity, the good, the bad, the messy, recognizing all of it in ourselves and in our partners, that's the key to true intimacy.
It's not about striving for this impossible standard of perfection.
No, it's about acceptance and integration. And this ties into his discussion of these archetypal figures that are, well, they're present in our collective unconscious. These figures that appear in myths and stories across cultures, like the dragon of chaos, the benevolent queen, those recurring
Okay,
characters.
are we talking about actual dragons here?
Haha, not literally. He's using these archetypes to symbolize different forces within us and in the world. So the dragon of chaos, it represents those destructive impulses, the tendency toward disorder, right? And the benevolent queen, well, she represents those nurturing, life-giving forces that support us.
So it's like he's giving us this new language
Mhm.
to talk about those deep psychological, those emotional forces that shape our lives.
Exactly. And he believes understanding these archetypes, it can help us navigate our relationships, help us see our patterns, and then ultimately make choices that align with who we really are.
I'm starting to connect the dots here, understanding our past, cultivating beauty, confronting those shadow sides of ourselves. It's all connected. And it can lead to these richer, more fulfilling relationships.
That's the foundation he's laying, for a more conscious, a more intentional approach to love, to
Yeah.
partnership. All right, now let's talk about finding meaning, finding purpose. Because Peterson talks a lot about that, especially in a world that can feel so overwhelming, so chaotic sometimes.
He makes this point that meaning isn't something we just stumble upon. It's not out there waiting for us. It's something we create through our actions, our choices.
He encourages us to just work as hard as we can on one thing, whatever that thing is, and just see what happens.
It's like taking action is the antidote to apathy.
He also talks about abandoning ideology. He's challenging us to question those rigid belief systems, those things that box us in. They keep us from engaging with the world in a more open, a more curious way.
So it's about recognizing complexity. Knowing that the world is not black and white, there are nuances.
He wants us to think for ourselves, to question our assumptions, to be willing to change our minds when we're presented with new information. To stay flexible.
It sounds like he's calling for intellectual humility.
Yeah.
Recognizing that truth, it's a journey. It's not a destination. Okay, what other challenges does he highlight?
Well, he talks about the danger of resentment, that bitterness, that feeling of being wronged. That can really poison us, keep us from taking responsibility for our own
He
choices.
tells all these client stories to show how resentment, it just festers and grows. It leads to cynicism, to hopelessness.
And it traps us in the past. We blame others for our misfortunes. We ignore our own power, our own potential to change.
So it's about taking back that power,
Yeah.
focusing on what we can control instead of dwelling on, all the things we can't.
He even connects resentment, too, to the biblical story of Cain and Abel, suggesting that it's this age-old human struggle, something we all deal with.
It's making me wonder, where is resentment lurking in my own life? Am I holding on to grudges? Am I blaming others for situations where maybe I need to take some ownership? Those are good questions.
And that's the kind of self-reflection he's encouraging. Be honest about those darker emotions and find healthy ways to let them go so we can move forward.
He also talks about the importance of, well, telling the truth to ourselves, to others.
He's adamant about that. Honesty, it's the foundation. It's what allows us to live a life that feels meaningful. And deception, even those little white lies, they chip away at our integrity, at our sense of self.
He uses this great metaphor, garbage in, garbage out. Like,
Yeah.
if we keep feeding ourselves lies, our internal compass, it just gets all messed up.
So we got to recognize that truth. Even when it's hard, it's what sets us free.
He also emphasizes responsibility in our relationships. Be honest. Communicate clearly.
Plan those date nights. Put in the effort to keep the romance alive. Don't let things fizzle out.
And be intentional about choosing a partner. Really understand what each person needs to feel fulfilled.
He's a big proponent of addressing conflict directly instead of just, sweeping it under the rug, hoping it'll magically go away.
It sounds like he's advocating for this courageous approach to love, acknowledging the challenges, but also the incredible rewards of a true partnership.
And he even goes as far as saying that vow of permanence in marriage, as extreme as it might seem, it can be really beneficial.
How so?
It creates the sense of urgency, right? And that motivates couples to work through those tough spots.
It's that no easy out thing again. So it's choosing to fight for the relationship instead of just giving up when the going gets rough.
Exactly. And he's not naive about it. He knows there will be bumps along the way. It's how we choose to navigate them. That's what really matters.
Right.
Okay, he also touches on the timing of big life decisions, suggesting that maybe we shouldn't put things off for too long, like having children.
Right. He's just acknowledging reality. The biological clock, it's a thing.
And he wants us to be honest about what we want, what we truly value, and make those choices instead of just following, some societal timeline.
It's about getting clear on what matters most and then going for it. He even shares a personal story about accompanying a client to an embalming.
Yeah, that was a powerful one. It was her way of confronting her fear of death, of really coming to terms with the finite nature of life.
So it was about facing her fear.
Exactly. And Peterson recognized that, he saw it as an important part of her journey.
I'm noticing this theme of confronting those big existential questions, even when it's uncomfortable.
Peterson doesn't sugarcoat it. Life is complex and challenging. And he doesn't offer easy answers, but what he does give us is a framework, a way to navigate those complexities with more awareness, more courage, and a willingness to face those difficult truths.
I got to admit, I'm already starting to examine my own life, seeing where I might be, I don't know, maybe holding myself back.
That's what his work does, right? It challenges us to think deeply, to question our assumptions, to really take ownership of our lives.
So if we had to sum it up, what's the overarching message here? What's the essence of what Peterson's trying to convey?
I think it's this. Life is hard. We all face suffering. We all face loss. But we also have this incredible capacity for growth, for meaning, for even redemption. He's offering us a map, a way to navigate those challenges with more awareness, more courage, more responsibility.
Yeah, it's about facing those dragons, cultivating beauty in our lives, creating relationships, a world that's a little bit better, a little bit brighter.
He's saying step into your potential, not as this perfect being, but as a flawed human being who's committed to making a difference.
That really resonates. It taps into that desire we all have to live a life that matters.
He's not sugarcoating it,
Yeah.
but he's giving us a way to face those challenges with honesty, integrity, and a willingness to embrace all of it, the good, the bad, the whole human experience.
We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still more to explore. We'll be back soon with the final part of our deep dive into Jordan B. Peterson's Beyond Order, 12 more rules for life. In the meantime, think about these ideas. How might they apply to your life? What resonated with you? Okay, welcome back to our deep dive into Jordan B. Peterson's Beyond Order. We've been talking about some pretty heavy stuff, right? Confronting our shadow selves, finding beauty in unexpected places, navigating the complexities of relationships. But what I keep coming back to is this idea that even though life is undeniably hard, it's also full of meaning.
And Peterson does such a good job of weaving together these ancient myths and psychological insights and personal stories to give us this framework for a meaningful life. He really challenges us to face those big questions, those existential questions head on.
He even says that suffering, it's part of being human. It's unavoidable.
Yeah.
But it's how we choose to respond to that suffering. That's what really shapes us.
He's all about resilience, learning to bounce back from those setbacks, seeing challenges as opportunities for growth. For transformation.
It's making me think about those times in my own life when I've faced adversity. Did I let it break me, or did I find a way to learn from it, to grow from it?
That's exactly the question he's asking us to consider. Don't see those difficult times as defeats, but as crucibles. They forge strength, wisdom, a deeper understanding of ourselves and of the world.
He uses this really powerful image. rescuing your father from the belly of the beast. It comes from that Egyptian myth, Osiris and Horus. Can you break that down for us a bit more?
So it's about confronting those forces of chaos, of darkness
Mm.
within us and out there in the world, and striving to restore order, to bring back meaning. And that myth reminds us that even those systems that seem, solid, well-established, they can become corrupted
Yeah.
or stagnant. And it takes real courage, real effort to revitalize them.
It sounds like he's saying that we all have this heroic potential, this ability to choose to be agents of change, even when we're up against these huge challenges.
Right. He's calling us to step into that role, to embrace that responsibility, to make the world a little bit better, a little bit brighter, a little more aligned with those values that we know are worth fighting for.
And he talks about telling the truth, even when it's hard. It's a
Yeah.
way to stay true to ourselves, to live a life of integrity.
He uses that analogy, garbage in, garbage out.
Mm-hmm.
If we keep feeding ourselves lies, our internal compass, it just gets all messed up.
Yeah. So honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, it's the foundation for a meaningful life.
And it's not just about being honest with ourselves, it's about being honest in our relationships with our partners, our families, our friends, even in the world at large.
He's talking about living in alignment, making sure our actions match our words, our values.
And he's not going to pretend it's easy. Speaking truth, it takes courage, especially when it means challenging the status quo or risking being unpopular.
But ultimately, honesty, it's the path to freedom, to a life that's truly worth living.
It's recognizing that our choices have consequences. And when we choose to live truthfully, well, we're contributing to a world that's a little bit more honest, a little more just.
Peterson's also big on personal responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
not just for our own lives, but for the world around us. He seems to be saying that we're not just passive bystanders. We're active participants in shaping our reality.
Yeah, he's reminding us that we have agency. Our choices, they matter. They make a difference. Even those small acts of kindness, of courage, of integrity, they can create this ripple effect that extends way beyond ourselves.
He uses that great line. Notice that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. He's encouraging us to look for those places where we can step up, make a difference.
It's a call to action. Take ownership, not just for our own lives, but for the well-being of our communities, of the world.
He's reminding us that we're all interconnected, right? What we do affects others. And by contributing to the common good, well, we're creating a better future for everyone.
Another thing he talks about is gratitude, focusing on what we have, not on what we lack.
It's so easy to get caught in that trap,
Mm.
always wanting more, comparing ourselves to others.
Just telling us to appreciate those simple things, the everyday blessings, the things we often take for granted. It's about cultivating contentment.
And Peterson, he doesn't shy away from the hard parts of life either. He acknowledges that suffering, loss, disappointment, pain, they're all part of the human experience.
He talks about those dark nights of the soul, when you question everything, when you feel overwhelmed by hopelessness.
And he says that in those moments, we have to find a way to hold on to hope, to find that spark of resilience.
He talks about faith, not necessarily in a religious sense, but as a belief that even when we can't see the way forward, there's something bigger than ourselves that's supporting us.
That we're not alone in our struggles. We're part of something bigger.
Yeah. He wants us to embrace awe and wonder, to notice the beauty, the mystery that's all around us, to feel a sense of reverence for life itself.
He even suggests making one room in our home as beautiful as possible, as a way to connect with that sense of wonder, to create a space where we can find solace, inspiration.
It's a reminder that beauty, it's everywhere if we just open our eyes to it. And finally, he circles back to relationships, reminding us to really invest in them. Romantic partnerships, friendships.
To choose our partners wisely.
To nurture those connections, to be willing to work through the rough patches. He's not painting this romanticized picture of love. He's giving us a more realistic view, and a more profound one, I think.
Yeah. He even says that vow of permanence, that till death do us part, it can actually be a good thing.
Because it creates that sense of urgency, right?
Yeah.
It motivates us to really put in the effort.
To choose to fight for that relationship, even when it's hard.
He's acknowledging that relationships take work, they take commitment,
Yeah.
and a willingness to have those tough conversations, to navigate those challenges together.
It's a choice. We choose to love, even when it's hard, because those rewards, they're immeasurable. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Jordan Peterson's Beyond Order, what are we left with? This sense of possibility, right? This understanding that even though life is messy, it's challenging, we have the power to choose how we respond, how we grow, how we contribute.
Peterson leaves us with this mix of hope and resilience and this potential to create a life that's truly meaningful, even in the face of suffering, even in the face of uncertainty.
He's urging us to embrace it all, the light, the shadow, and to live according to those values that resonate deep within us.
So what will you do with these insights? How will they shape your life? What resonated with you the most? And what's one small step you can take today to live those principles? Keep those questions in mind as you continue on your journey.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Beyond Order. We hope you found it, I don't know, maybe even a little bit transformative.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those tough questions, and keep striving to create a life that truly matters.